The Dreamer's Edge podcast is recorded in front of a studio audience with a flock of seagulls' hair. Hi everyone, my name is Dimitri, webmaster of thedreamersedge.com and movie critic for AskMen.com.
I'm Chasm. I'm an English editor for Deluxe Digital, a subtitling company.
Welcome to the Dreamer's Edge podcast, episode 6, 37, 40.
Bingo!
Today we're talking about the 80s.
Woo!
If you say so, I hate it. We're gonna go...
I'm just enthusiastic about everything. I'm clearly on drugs. Continue.
We're gonna start with a quick show and tell, where we're gonna tell you a little bit about our favorite thing from the 80s.
So I'm going to start off. The Secret of Nim. A lot of the reviewers felt this is too heavy for a children's film, but to be honest, I think it's perfectly fine, you know? Especially these days, and with kids with the Harry Potter series and whatever, I think they can handle it. Kids are resilient. Basically, The Secret of Nim involves a society of mice and rats. And the story begins with Mrs. Brisby, who has recently lost her husband. She's struggling to raise their kids, and she encounters an older rat named Nicodemus, who eventually reveals to her the secret of NIM, which stands for National Institute of Mental Health. Basically, Nicodemus, along with Mrs. Brisby's husband, were part of a project at this institution that experimented on rats and mice, leaving them with human-like intellect and the capability of producing electricity and various other sort of high technology. And basically what these creatures do is they escape from NIM, and they're all about kind of breaking their dependence from humanity. So I think it's actually a really interesting story. It really forces you to think about the ramifications of animal experimentation, which is an interesting subject. I mean, it's a continuous one. I mean, there are a lot of good points for it, lots of pros for animal experimentation, because you can't do it on humans. I think for a lot of people that's crossing a line.
Yeah, it all depends on whether you value human life over animal life. So it's not a clear-cut debate of evil.
Exactly, and I think that's why I've always really liked that film. And I mean, even within the mice-rat society, there are those who still want to cling to the power that they have gained as a result of their enhanced intellect. So there's that dynamic also at work, you know, and it's a reflection of our society as a whole within this small community. And it was also interesting because it was so different from the Disney stuff that I think most people were familiar with when it comes to animation.
Was it Don Bluth?
Yes, you're correct. It is Don Bluth. Yeah.
Well, Don Bluth used to work for Disney.
Exactly.
Fans of animation really look for Don Bluth's work in the 80s. In the 90s, he starts to lose his mind a little bit. Too much Dragon's Lair. My recommendation is a movie called Chocolate War. It's a 1988 movie directed by Keith Gordon, based on the 1974 Robert Cormier book. It's about school children, high school students in a private religious school who sell chocolate, and behind that is a secret society, a sub-government, who kind of use the chocolate sales to gain influence in the school with the faculty. And the faculty is complicit in that because they just want to sell more chocolate to bring money into the school. And it's essentially a metaphor for what's going on in terms of government. Yes, I'm choosing an adaptation of the 74 book as my 80s pick, but hear me out. The soundtrack is Kate Bush, Peter Gabriel, Yaz.
If you can't see me, I'm cheering silently in the corner. I love Kate Bush. Alison Moyet of Yaz. Woo!
For those who are not familiar with these artists, this is not cheesy pop Debbie Gibson 80s. This is alternative, really thoughtful 80s artists.
It's actually good stuff. Even if you listen to it now, I think you'd still like it.
And their music fits every scene beautifully. One thing for fans of the book that I should mention, the ending is very different from the ending of the book. But ironically, it's true to the spirit. Cormier's book really hammers its cynicism and really hits you hard with it. The movie's ending seems a little bit more Hollywood at first look, but it's actually very subversive, very subtle. You go, yay! Oh. It's also a who's who of television personalities of today, because the movie stars, it has Doug Hutchinson in it, who now plays Horace in Lost. It has Adam Baldwin of Chuck and Firefly fame. It has John Glover of Smallville, and that's a face I was really surprised to see. Wallace Langham from CSI Crime Scene Investigation.
You know, he shows up in the most surprising places.
Yeah. And what's really cool is that he plays the slimy James Spader role from the 80s. You know? The role that James Spader would play in every movie. Yeah, that's played by the creepy chemist in CSI. That's, by the way, Chocolate War. The 1988 movie, not Chocolate Wars, the documentary about Hershey versus M&M.
Sorry. Just easy to get confused, obviously.
What defined the 80s for you?
I think the thing that sticks with me most from the 80s, probably with a lot of people, is the music. I know a lot of people think of the 80s as just a series of one-hit wonders, but on the one hand you have this pop sort of fluffy kind of stuff coming out, but there were actually some interesting trends in the 80s. I mean, you start to get the rise of like the female bands.
Yes.
You know, like the Go-Go's, the Bangles, and of course, you know, female-fronted groups like Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. They did start in the 70s, but I'm going to say it anyway, the Pretenders, because it's late 70s, and Chrissie Hynde basically leads the way through the 80s.
Just as an aside, I want to clarify, when we talk about the 80s, we're talking about a cultural trend, which will bleed into the early 90s and 70s. Yeah. It's not like January 1st, 1980, the world, fashion, politics, arts just change all of a sudden. It's a gradual thing. So if we name something that turns out to be in the 70s and 90s, chillax. That's going to happen because we're talking about the culture, not the specific date.
Exactly, and I'm sure you'll find that if you check out any of these films that we mentioned, if you haven't already seen them, you'll see that's already evident in the films themselves, the fact that this transition is taking place. But again, for me, the music, on one hand, you have a lot of it that's very lighthearted, that's very fun, you know, it's about celebrating their youth. And then on the other hand, I have to admit the bands I like best are a little more morose.
So you're in the big punk renaissance.
Exactly. Like I'm more on that side. I'm like on the Susie and the Banshees kind of side, the Smiths kind of side of things. But I do appreciate fluff as well. I do have some OMD songs. If you don't know who OMD is, Orchestral Movements in the Dark. They're quite fun. If you watch Pretty in Pink, you'll probably recognize some of their songs there. Being a child in the 1980s, despite being very young, I was aware, like, of the political turmoil that was taking place. But, I don't know, there was a strange exuberance to a lot of things about living life and coming of age. And then my own sort of childhood expression of, you know, loving things and then not realizing, oh, this is a statement against capitalism. Oh, really? Didn't know. I just like this. Or this is against nuclear war. I'm like, oh, I just like the way this sounds. You know? Hey, who didn't want to walk like an Egyptian? It's all good.
What was that a statement about?
Nothing. I just felt like throwing that one in. Okay. No, I was thinking, in terms of political statements, I was thinking every day is like Sunday, which is Morrissey after he left the Smiths. At the time when I first heard, I had no idea what that song was about. I like the sense of alienation, of isolation that it had, you know. And then when I realized, you know, it's talking about the idea of there being a nuclear war and there being very few survivors and kind of remembering a past that's now forever lost to you and your connection to those people was kind of interesting. Didn't think of it at the time. Later, after many listenings.
Well, you'd be hard-pressed to misinterpret Russians by Sting, wouldn't you?
That's true. Or, you know, Dancing with Tears in My Eyes by Ultravox. Very political.
Start a fire. I thought it was about a campfire.
Yeah, exactly. We're just warming our hands. But what about you? What kind of significance did the 80s hold for you?
For me, 3 words. Bigger is better.
Oh, that is true. Mantra.
That's finance. They just let their crash in the early 90s because they just went nuts because they were all on coke. All the traders were on coke.
True. It was true, kids. We're not lying.
Yeah, no, that's not even remotely an exaggeration.
No, it's very true. It was considered integral.
Yeah. In politics, as seen in the arms race, obviously, and in fashion, the shoulder pads, the hair. Like, the higher the hair was, the better looking you apparently were.
Yes. Aggressive makeup.
Oh.
With the big blue eyeshadow and then the streaks of red up the cheek.
Back in the 80s, if you went into a club, all the women looked like cast members of Cats.
It's true. It was all about excess. That's
Yeah.
right. More makeup, more clothes, more money, bigger cars, bigger budgets for movies, bloated budgets, really. And then, of course, the demand to make sure people pack the cinema so they can make back their money.
And that for me defines the 80s, this intense shallowness.
Which I think also comes across in the films, like the stereotypes. These people don't usually have a lot of dimension to them. They're stock characters. Maybe they kind of grow at the end, but part of me always had the feeling that they're going to go back to their lives as they were at the beginning of the film. They hadn't really changed all that much.
Yeah, action movies were all about the good guys on the side of the good guys because he's a cop and for no other reason, and then guns down a whole bunch of people.
Yes.
But they're the bad guys, and that makes him the winner, and aren't we great?
Yeah, and forget about the fact that innocent people are casualties of this rampage that they've apparently gone on. Yes, that was big in the 80s. The action movies. You had your Stallones, obviously.
Yeah.
You have your Schwarzeneggers.
Yeah.
Of course, Bruce Willis comes in there with Die Hard. Chuck Norris.
I'm not saying anything bad about Chuck Norris.
Mel Gibson with kind of the Lethal Weapon movies. There were a lot of these sort of big action, speed, violence. There wasn't a lot more to it. It was very simplistic. The idea of the high concept film, which belies its real nature, called a high concept film, but the whole point is that it is as simple as possible. You can sum it up in 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah.
That's it.
Alright, well, okay. So, we've bitched quite a bit.
Yeah, I know.
What would you like to see return? We are in the midst of a comeback, and let's try to think positively.
I'd love to see Mr. T come back and be in a series of guest appearances on Heroes.
Wow, that's a great concept, because
Yeah.
to bring back Mr. T Heroes? That's
I think,
awesome.
I think that would fit him to a T. Yeah.
Oh wow, I can't believe you just did that.
Wait.
But
It was all planned.
because I wanted to see Mr. T as well, but I was going like, let's revive TNT.
TNT!
For those of you who
I almost
don't
fell out of my chair there, folks.
For those of you who don't know, TNT is about Mr. T and Amy Taylor, played by Alexandra Amini, yes, who play a lawyer and a private detective solving crimes as the TNT team. It was a Canadian show.
I don't know why that makes that funnier, but it does.
I'd like also to see more teen films in the John Hughes tradition. By that I mean not teen movies that pander to your fantasies, but that deal with how you really feel. I'm thinking of films like Say Anything.
Oh, John Cusack, a very good one.
That movie doesn't show any characters that you'd necessarily want to be. They show you characters that you'll automatically at that age associate with, and they deal with the sort of angst and the sort of bad decisions you do make at that age.
Yeah.
And there were full of movies like that
That's
back in the 80s.
That is true. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, 16 Candles,
Breakfast Club, an ultimate
Breakfast Club,
classic.
obviously.
Ferris Bueller's
Day Off, great movie.
Yeah,
it's
it's-
still a classic, honestly.
Oh yeah, it's one of my
80s doesn't
favorite
have a lot
movies.
of classics. That's a classic film from the 80s.
Yeah. It's a little bit more broad, but there's a lot of depth there.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see more teen-oriented.
Yeah, and not
Film.
teen-oriented film like Hannah Montana, which I saw it. It's not a bad movie. You can.
I will also admit that I do find the television series kind of funny.
Yeah, no.
So
Honestly, if you have kids of the age that they would appreciate that, you can do a lot worse than Hannah Montana. It has a generally positive message. It's not like the Jonas Brothers, where Disney is clearly trying to sell sex to your teenagers, but masking it with something else.
Yeah.
Hannah Montana really is about empowerment for young girls. It's not anything hypocritical about it.
yeah, exactly.
But it is a little bit more fantasy based, and I'd like to see something a little bit more like, look, you're not alone. We know exactly what you're dealing with because I'm making a movie about it.
Yeah,
You know?
rather than I'm sorry to say for any fans out there, High School Musical.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be interested in that.
I like the first one.
Well, was it because it was actually set in a school?
Yeah.
Say more, say more.
Alright. I want to see cynicism-free horror franchises. The 90s and today, the horror films are very inwards looking, and they trick the audience, and they're all about pushing the boundaries. Well, in the 90s not, but the ones today now, and even the ones in the 90s were really self-referential and self-mocking. The 80s had slasher and horror movies that were as pure in spirit as the ones from the 40s and 50s. They just wanted to create new monsters, give you a big thrill ride, and that's all. And I want to see it come back to that. And that doesn't mean I want to see Jason again. I don't want to see those remakes. And I don't want to see Freddy again that much, or Michael Myers. I want studios to create new monsters that are just monsters without being something like Jigsaw, where it's like, I'm really a moral figure. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
You know?
Yes. No.
They're pure evil. They represent a specific evil, and then you have characters defeating that evil. That's what I want to see, something as pure as that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think that's fantastic, actually. Because, honestly, to be sometimes, there's just evil. There's just evil that you can't understand it. The only thing you can do is fight against it.
Well, the last one you're probably not going to like as much. I want to see more 2D platformers. They're already starting with the Nintendo DS and the Virtual Console. They recently made a new Mega Man that's 8-bit. I don't mind you using the technology to create great 3D graphics, but there's something a lot more fun to me about just jumping from one platform while moving to the right than there is about exploring this whole complicated universe with 17 buttons to, pull out a gun.
I have to admit, I have to agree with you on that, because that's really when I was playing video games the most. I enjoy that. It was easy to do. Not as complicated. It's probably why I get more frustrated these days when I'm trying to play. It's like, how many moves do I have to do just one? No.
And I'm not fighting evolution. I just want to point out that this is not me going, oh, 3D sucks. No, 3D is fun too, but it's a different gameplay. It's not the same experience, and I'd like to see both happen. Keep digging into the 3D experience, because it's already pretty exciting. But the 2D experience wasn't done yet. There's still a lot to explore in terms of having fun in that level.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, that's enough positivity.
Yeah, it's like, damn.
Yeah, exactly. What do you not want to come back? What sucks, Dragon Balls?
I was thinking about the cartoons that were on TV at the time. Things like the short-lived Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you remember when they had, basically the WWF. It was known as the WWF, not the WWE. I didn't really get anything from those cartoons. You know what I mean? What they were just doing is they were just taking characters from other sort of areas and bringing them in.
They were glorified toy commercials.
Yeah, that's really what it was. Just toy commercials. I mean, even Gem, the point of the television show was to help merchandise the product. That was kind of a problem in the 80s. It worked the wrong way around in terms of, television animation. I'm trying to think of a cartoon that I watched in the 80s that I really enjoyed.
I was really into G.I. Joe myself.
Yeah, G.I. Joe I watched. Transformers I watched. Oh god, He-Man, She-Ra. I don't know. I don't really need to see those ones again. Although, mind you, I was a big fan of She-Ra at the time. Simply because I like the idea of, an empowered female heroine, I like that.
Yeah, I always liked She-Ra a lot more than He-Man.
Yeah, that was actually the series I paid a lot more attention to. Yeah. I had a She-Ra doll.
There was a really specific reason for me. He-Man was the son of a king, had his own castle, had superpowers on top of it. He could transform into He-Man. And he beat up on this little skinny Skeletor guy, who's essentially an anorexic kid that's getting picked on, really, by the big muscly jock. She-Ra, on the other hand, was fighting an empire. She was fighting an evil emperor with an unlimited supply of robot soldiers. She was achieving something with her life, darn it.
True. Yeah. But, one thing I definitely don't want to see come back is the idea of using cartoons as a venue for selling toys. Although, mind you, that really hasn't changed.
Is there that many cartoons that sell toys? Because I can't think of that many.
I would think Yu-Gi-Oh!, Bakugan. Pokemon, I'm not sure of the development if it was a game first.
Game first. All the ones you're naming, though,
Yeah,
they're all Japanese.
that's true. Maybe perhaps it's time for North America to kind of create something of its own rather than relying on Japan.
But they do. American cartoons are not about toys. It's what I came to realize because the argument came out when we recorded the Batman episode, and I just let it go because I didn't really think about it. And then when I went back to edit it, I realized, wait, I don't know how factual that is. Batman Brave and Bold, no toys for that.
Exactly, that's true.
Wolverine the X-Men, no
Wolverine the
toys for
X-Men,
that.
that's true. I guess that's a cultural difference. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know enough to speak on it. It just seems that the most popular ones, at least amongst children, seem to be the ones that originate in Japan. But if you actually look at what's coming out of North America, it's very different.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to do top 4 things I don't want to see again from the 80s. Number 4, flock of seagull haircuts, or just 80s fashion in general.
Men wearing women's blouses is not zany.
Exactly. Shoulder pads, not that cool. Especially when the shoulder pad makes the women look like they have no necks.
Yes.
Number 3, that macho nonsense in those action movies that we talked about earlier. Like Predator. It is macho, misogynistic, borderline racist garbage. I say borderline racist. I would normally say outright racist, but its misogyny overtakes the racism.
A rare feat.
It's all about a bunch of macho manly men who go into the jungle and then find a woman, and of course she's an Asian demure woman. I don't want to stick too much on the fact that she's Asian. I'm going to concentrate more on the fact that she's a woman, and therefore not allowed to carry a gun and take part in the great contest of macho men. Then the alien, who's clearly a man as well because he has a gigantic...
Codpiece?
Yes.
I know these things.
Because that's what she was watching. That's the image of manhood that we have at that time. For heaven's sake. And I'm so scared because I do write for a certain men's magazine, and our audience, that's exactly what they're looking for. They're so confused about their image of manhood in a post-feminist world, which I appreciate, and I think it's something we should build upon. And I'm so exasperated and saddened when I see them attach them, because they don't know what to attach themselves to. They attach themselves to that sort of nonsense.
Yeah.
And I could really deal without that coming back.
We should have mentioned Predator earlier.
Yeah.
That was perfect. Especially in contrast to Aliens. But please, number 2.
Ninja movies.
Oh God! How did we miss those?
American Ninja 1 through 79.
Oh Lord.
Where the white ninjas, and I mean white by the fact that they dress white, or by the fact that they're American. I can't decide because it works both ways.
It's true!
By it's the evil black ninjas. Thank you very
that
much.
dichotomy was very prevalent in the 80s.
And I also fear that it might come back because Frank Miller is really popular right now, and he can only draw ninjas.
Oh Lord.
Take that, Frank Miller.
Frank Miller, I guess that means those movies will be chock full of misogyny. Sorry.
That's true. Frank Miller pretty much embodies number 3 and number 2.
Exactly. Do we have any hope?
And the number 1 thing that I don't want to see brought back, Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Oh, no wonder breakdancing went underground. It was exploited to the nth degree in the 80s and lost all credibility.
But speaking of Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, it's time for the Electric Boogaloo Factory.
Woohoo!
Now you know where the title comes from.
Exactly.
Most unnecessary sequel ever. Now, the Electric Boogaloo Factory is when we take a movie that doesn't deserve a sequel and we try to imagine one. But this time we're going to do something different because it's all about reviving franchises from the 80s. We decided to pick a franchise that's just not likely to get a revival and see what would happen if we made a movie out of it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Jem and the Holograms.
Alrighty. Basically, I imagine Jem emerging as a Cher-like figure. She's in her 50s now. She's looking to make a comeback.
Nice.
And she knows the only way to do that is to get the hippest, okay, you can tell I'm really dated, hippest, coolest new artists out there.
Spankin'.
Including T-Pain. You must have T-Pain. Nicole from the Pussycat Dolls. And the Jonas Brothers. Possibly Akon, I haven't decided yet. And of course, It's going to be about her struggle of making certain seminal tracks on her comeback album with the help of the vocal synthesizer, naturally, since that seems to be the thing these days. And her trying to confront her age while at the same time trying to get back into mainstream music. And basically I have her becoming basically making her big comeback. Her tracks become huge at all the clubs, and they're remixed by former lead singer of Culture Club, now turned DJ, Boy George.
Nice.
That would be Jem and the holograms. As you notice, I got rid of the holograms.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I couldn't fit them in. I kind of saw her thinking she had a better chance on her own. I know that's not very Jem-like. I couldn't figure out how I wanted to fit
These
them
should
in.
be her groupies.
Ooh.
Because Jem is all about clean, optimistic pop.
True.
And so her groupies should represent the singers that represent that in today's age. So Miley Cyrus should be in the holograms.
Hilary Duff.
Hilary Duff in
That
the
would be
holograms.
good.
You know, to a lesser extent, Mandy Moore, only because she's the only one in the bunch that can act.
Yes, true. You would need her to help carry them.
Exactly. And you didn't mention the Misfits too much.
I know, I didn't mention the Misfits or the Stingers.
I think the Misfits also should be younger than Jem. Jem should be the only 50-year-old, the only elder figure,
That's
if
true.
you will. And the Misfits should represent that cynical folk punk that Jem had to put up with throughout the 90s and the new millennium.
Nice. I like that.
So, yeah, we're talking about all those grudge bands and the Alanis Morissette clones and all those guys.
Emo Central. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was thinking of who should play Pizzazz, the leader of the Misfits, and I was like, well, it has to be somebody who gets the joke.
Yeah.
And at the same time has that kind of edge to her, but doesn't necessarily approve of that edge. And the only one I could think of is Katy Perry.
That would work really, really well.
I know, yeah. And it would be all about Jem trying to bring back the old spirit of pop in this new,
dispensing with the cynicism and the sense of always having to be dysfunctional.
Because I hate band movies like Josie and the Pussycats. Remember that
movie?
Yeah. And it was all about anti-corporatism, and it's like, who are you kidding? You're being made by a huge
Exactly.
studio. It's so hypocritical. So Jem should be pro that corporatism, but fight the hypocrisy of not calling it what it is.
Which would actually tie into her past, because remember, she owned her own music corporation, so she's in the biz.
Yeah. But she's honest about who she is.
Exactly.
So it's all about truth, and she would be fighting disenfranchisement, and of course, Jem and the Holograms, they have powers.
Yeah.
And so she could fight with her, cheer up people and stop whinging about everything.
Yeah, they had Star House. They were very into taking care of the orphans.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've got a film on our hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she could shoot hearts from her chest. Oh, wait.
That's Care Bears.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
I was on a roll there, but I screwed up. I guess that's a good time to sign up.
I think so.
All right. Well, next episode, tune in for the 90s Strike No One. And we'll see you next time.
I'm Chasm.
And we're having a... What did I say? Whoa.
I'm having a baby.
Yeah.